When I was about 3 years old, I had a conversation, if you will, with my dad. And I said to him, I want to be a nurse. And he said, well, why not a doctor? And I said, girls can't be doctors. And he said, of course they can be doctors. And I said, okay, well then I want to be a doctor.
Hello, my name is Christine DiCarlo, and I'm the Senior Manager of Media and Public Affairs with the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine, or AACOM. This Women in Medicine Month, AACOM is interviewing Renée Volny Darko, DO, MBA, an obstetrician-gynecologist with more than 15 years of experience helping pre-medical students get accepted into medical school. She is the founder of Pre-med Strategies, Inc., hosts the Total Pre-med Makeover podcast, and serves as a mentor in the Tour for Diversity in Medicine. Dr. Darko practices in rural and underserved communities, participates in medical missions in Ghana, and works to address health policy issues and women's health disparities through freelance writing. Dr. Darko's commitment to diversity in medicine and passion for helping others succeed are an inspiring example to women in osteopathic medicine and beyond. To celebrate Women in Medicine Month, AACOM is speaking with Dr. Darko about her considerable accomplishments as a leader, her advice and words of wisdom to others, especially women who are interested in medicine, and her thoughts about the importance of supporting, recruiting, and retaining women in medicine, especially those from populations who are traditionally underrepresented in the field. Dr. Darko, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today about this important topic.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So our first question for you, as a non-traditional pre-medical student, you were determined to get into medical school on your first try. You developed a successful application strategy and were accepted into both DO and MD schools. Did you always know you wanted to be a doctor, and more specifically, a doctor of osteopathic medicine?
I actually knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a doctor, or at least I said that, right? I think many of us say that we want to be doctors when we're really young, even before we quite understand what that is. And what's really funny, especially, for Women in Medicine Month, is that when I was about 3 years old, I had a conversation, if you will, with my dad. And I said to him, I want to be a nurse. And he said, well, why not a doctor? And I said, girls can't be doctors. And he said, of course they can be doctors. And I said, okay, well then I want to be a doctor. But as I got older, obviously I realized that my father was right. But you mentioned me being a non-traditional student. I had a pretty tough transition going into college. I had always done very well in school. And once I got into college, I think I was overwhelmed with the amount of coursework that I had had. I don't think that I actually had really good study habits. And I went to my pre-med advisor, spoke with her, and she essentially said that I should go to graduate school and do something else. Now, you have to understand this is in my first year of college. So I'm about 18, 19 years old. And, I'm being told that my life is determined upon the fact that I failed chemistry. And so that did not necessarily bode well with me. So no options were given to me. There wasn't a discussion of, much less allopathic schools, definitely not osteopathic schools. So I didn't actually learn about osteopathic schools until much later, while I was doing my post-bac. I went to the Student National Medical Association conference, and, they have a ton of workshops, all competing, with each other. And I chose to go to the osteopathic medicine info session, if you will. And there is where I met my mentor. And he, kind of, taught me even more about osteopathic medicine, inspired me to apply much more widely than I was applying. And, eventually I did end up getting into both MD and DO schools, but ultimately chose DO because of the philosophy. And for me, it's been, one of the best choices that I've made in my life.
Yeah, that's great. We're very grateful to both your father and to your student colleague who pushed you into medicine, introduced you to osteopathic medicine. So that's great.
Yeah.
So our next question for you, In addition to your medical career, you're also very passionate about helping more students get into medical school. How do you balance caring for patients while helping nurture the next generation of physicians? Essentially, how do you do it all?
One of the things that I think I also realized kind of early on in my career is that I wanted to help pre-meds get into medical school as well, especially underrepresented pre-meds in medicine. And so for me, the balance, if you will, comes about with an intentional way of working. And so currently, I do what they call locum tenens, and that allows me a number of things. Number one is flexibility. Being able to be flexible with my schedule allows me to kind of use my time in the most effective way for me. And that is obviously I get to use some of that time seeing patients. I get to use some of that time with my family. I have 2 young children, and it also allows me time to work with pre-meds and do other projects that I think, might have gone by the wayside, but are, really important in terms of what I do in medicine.
So our next question, during the inaugural Dr. Meta Christie presentation at Educating Leaders 2022, our AACOM annual conference, you spoke about the importance of mentorship. How has finding a mentor impacted your career, and what advice would you share with others who are searching for a mentor?
Having a mentor really changed my trajectory. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have a mentor. I probably would have still gotten into medical school, but I don't know that I would have had the enriching experiences that I have had. I mentioned that I met one of my mentors, my first mentor actually, in at the SNMA conference. Um, he was able to really not just solidify for me, my passion for osteopathic medicine, but also kind of solidify for me that, being a physician means more than just going in and seeing patients, right? Being a physician means having impact on people's lives, whatever that means. And so it doesn't always have to be the clinical impact that we think, the health impact that we think. So when you find a mentor, you really should be taking so many pieces of that mentor and kind of shaping your life in a way where you can be helpful to people in more than just a clinical sense. As far as finding a mentor, I know a lot of students really have a challenge with finding mentors. So one of the things I do tell students is that a mentor doesn't just have to be a physician, and you don't just need one mentor. As a matter of fact, I actually encourage students to have more than just one mentor. And you can find mentors all over. We often peg ourselves into this whole like, no, it has to be a physician. It has to be a physician in the specialty in which I'm interested. And that is just such a narrow way of looking at things, right? And so I encourage them to, to realize that there are mentors all around them. Right now, I have about 5 mentors that I can think of off the top of my head. And I'm a full-fledged practicing physician. So mentorship continues throughout your career. And I have those mentors, for different reasons. They serve different purposes for me. And what's great about the mentoring relationship is that as you cultivate that relationship, and it is up to me to cultivate that relationship with my mentors. So that's another thing that I say to students. It's up to you as a student to cultivate that relationship. But the more and more you cultivate that relationship, the longer that relationship goes on, all of a sudden that mentoring goes both ways. And so I have my mentors calling me for advice, and so it's just a great relationship to have. And so I want the students that I work with to really understand that mentoring relationship and realize that there are so many things that they can get from it. This initiative that I'm going to be launching through MEDEC is actually one where they will be able to meet people who can be mentors to them, by virtual conference, and then teach them how to cultivate that relationship. I think, oftentimes we tell students, find a mentor, but they are, one, very scared, two, don't really know how to do it. And I think, a little bit of hand holding isn't going to hurt anyone. But once you give them the tools that they need, they can potentially do so many great things. And I think we need to just give them that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Darko. That sounds like an incredible resource. It's MEDEC Mentors?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, we'll be sure to put that in the notes and everything so people can find it. And also your mentor, I don't know if he was a DO or not, but he sounds like, oh, he was.
Yeah.
I love that he encouraged you to be like your full mind, body, spirit self, in addition to just your physicianship. So that's
Absolutely.
wonderful. So our next question for you, last year, the nation's colleges of osteopathic medicine, or COMs, unanimously committed to a first of its kind effort to address systemic inequity and increase medical student diversity. What advice would you share with COMs to help them recruit and retain more diverse medical students?
So one is to do things like, commit to these kinds of efforts, right? And realize that there is systemic inequity across the board, and realize that you have to build the system such that it works the way that it's supposed to work, right? So if there's systemic inequity, it's because the system is built in such a way where inequities potentially can thrive. And so what you have to do is build a system such that inequity cannot thrive, that it will not be tolerated, that what you are looking for is something that is equitable, inclusive, diverse. So you really have to build those kinds of systems. And I talked about this on the Dr. Meta Christie presentation at Educating Leaders. And, it's really important to understand that while medical students have a great impact on the culture of an institution, that it really is up to the institution to build that system such that the medical students that believe in an equitable system will be attracted and will continue, in that vein to cultivate that particular culture of the institution. The curriculum should be inclusive, should include situations in which in which students can realize why inequities exist outside of this, utopia that we've built, and understand that it's not always going to look like this. It's not going to look like where you necessarily grew up everywhere that you go. People come from all different walks of life, and that, compassion and empathy are going to be extremely important in your role as a physician, and that you cannot approach people with your own worldview in mind, that you have to really understand. You may not necessarily embody their worldview, but you have to understand their worldview, whether it's contradictory to yours or not. And I think doing more exercises like that within the curriculum will help within the faculty development curriculum, and also understanding that the staff also needs in servicing, they need their own curriculum as well, down to the maintenance workers, your security officers, your lunch staff, right, your cafeteria staff. All of those people should be on board. It really should not be just an academic exercise that happens for academians and students. It really should be just an institution-wide obligation that people have.
Yeah, I love that holistic approach on the culture shift, how it'll take everyone. I think that's important. And I also like that you mentioned the curricular aspect that kind of leads into the next question. So this July, AACOM launched a critically important new program to help equip third-year osteopathic medical students with skills they need to treat more diverse patient populations once they enter the medical profession. So why is it essential for DOs to learn about health equity and health disparities?
We all know that osteopathic medicine has a huge emphasis in primary care, and that's usually where patients will enter the healthcare system, is through some sort of primary care provider. And without understanding what health equity means, what health disparities exist, we're going to miss a lot of things. We're going to miss a lot, and whole communities can be affected, whole families can be affected. And so it's important to learn about those things, because we can actually have a very direct impact on making sure that, health resources are distributed equitably amongst different communities. It's also important to understand, because we know that there is a dearth of physicians in certain communities. And, I think it's our responsibility as a profession to ensure that, those inequities, those disparities get addressed appropriately, right? That we, don't have just kind of these splash campaigns about, health equity to just show awareness. I'm all about awareness, but we also have to make actionable steps to be able to address these things, so that they actually are decreasing in the negative impacts that they are having. So I think, learning about health inequities, especially at the third year level of medical school, will help students on the wards for the first time really understand what it is that they're seeing.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. I love that. And I think you're right on. We talked to some third-year students who did the pilot course, and they said it was very helpful when they went into clinicals, because they had that view right from the beginning when they're working with patients. So
Yeah.
anyone watching who's interested, please check out the program and participate. So our final question for you. So today, women make up more than 50% of osteopathic medical school matriculants, which is great. However, discrimination against women in medicine still remains, despite studies that show that patients who are treated by female physicians experience better health outcomes.
Yeah.
So what support from the osteopathic medical education community have you found pivotal throughout your career? And what additional support could osteopathic medical educators provide to women in medicine?
As women, we bring a lot of value to medicine. We bring a lot of value to medicine, but we are not necessarily compensated well for that value, or at least we're not compensated equitably for that value. I think, in osteopathic medicine, just kind of the history of osteopathic medicine really is an inspirational thing, in that, Dr. Meta Christie, first Black female physician. I mean, for me, that's something that says, okay, this is a profession that I think from its kind of onset has seen that medicine doesn't necessarily have to look kind of white male dominated. We know also, besides, first Black female physician, that the first osteopathic students included women. And so for me, that is also inspirational to know that, okay, when A.T. Still was kind of breaking the mold, he didn't just break the mold with allopathic versus osteopathic. He went all out. He looked at the gender, the disproportionate numbers in gender, and decided that he was going to attack that as well. And so I think, within osteopathic medicine, just that history coming from that has really meant something to me in my own career. As far as, the support that osteopathic medicine can give today, I think it's, a number of things. Certainly helping to address the pay gap, right? The gender pay gap. I think that's something that, the osteopathic profession can certainly be more vocal about. I know that there are, lots of different initiatives like the one that we just mentioned, about treating more diverse patient populations. I think that that might be something within the curriculum that can also be mentioned, right? To understand that, your medical profession. I was saying this to my husband last night, actually, that the medical profession cannot be just about treating patients. It has to be also about caring for doctors, right? And in understanding that, women physicians don't necessarily see the same, or seeing that women physicians don't necessarily get compensated in the same way as their male counterparts, that weighs on you. We talked about physician burnout recently. All of that is part of it, that you're working really hard, you need to be compensated, but you're not necessarily, getting your worth, your value is going unrecognized in some way. So understanding that when you address the pay gap, that women will feel seen. So that's really important. I think also coming up with scholarships for women physicians, right? For women going into medicine. I think that's going to be important. So, really understanding as well that women physicians face different obstacles when we start families, for example, which also kind of ties into the pay gap, because that's also kind of an excuse, if you will, as to why people say, well, women take more time off. I'm like, yeah, because we're growing the population. You wouldn't be here without us, right? So understanding that women have other challenges when it comes to being a physician, working as a physician, but realizing that those quote unquote challenges really go a long way in helping us to give the care that we give. This is why we're able to get the outcomes that we have. So starting a family is not a bad thing. Starting a family probably helps us to be more compassionate, more empathetic, right? It probably helps us to get those outcomes that, unfortunately, our male counterparts don't necessarily get. So we have that experience that we bring with us that our male counterparts don't necessarily bring with them. And so our value, I mean, it means something. It means something to patients. It means something to whole communities. So I think that there are a number of steps that the osteopathic profession can take. I think they can learn from some of the diversity initiatives that we've had and just kind of replicate those things in such a way that they address women in medicine issues specifically. But I think that there's no limit on the things that we can do to really give women in medicine the recognition that we deserve.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Darko. Again, love that answer. And yeah, I love that you tied it back to the history of osteopathic medicine. I mean, we did start with inclusivity, with supporting women. So it would be good to continue on that track for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really enjoyable. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Your work is very important. It's very inspiring. I know women in medicine, osteopathic medicine, beyond, everyone will be really benefit from the talk today. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this.